All right. Hey, folks. How's it going? I'm back after quite a bit of a hiatus. I was in LA for work and I was there for a whole month and I'm finally back. It's good to be back. I haven't broadcasted anything for at least a month and a half now, and it's time. This week's, I don't know if I'm doing them weekly or not. This hasn't been planned out yet, but this episode is going to be on hazing. And it requires a little bit of backstory. So hazing is bad. It's not a big deal to me. It doesn't affect me currently, but the reason I want to talk about it is because back in my Marine Corps days, I was once put up for a meritorious promotion, and as part of that promotion, I needed to give a speech on something. They didn't tell us what it was. They were going to tell us, and then we were going to have to give the speech on it. Right when we walked into the room. So they would tell us, and then we'd instantly have to kick off on the speech, which is pretty terrifying, and I was terrified at the time. And I went into it, and I was shaking, basically, and I stood there, and they're like, all right, give us a presentation on hazing, and it's got to be 5 minutes long. And I blanked. I completely blanked. I think I made one or two attempts at a first sentence, and then I kind of mentally checked out. And that's something I actually used to do a lot, and I didn't know until recently, working through therapy and other things, is that that's a common defense mechanism for a lot of people with anxiety or with stage fright or whatever the case may be, is that they can kind of flip a switch and check out, and that's what I did. So I absolutely failed that portion of the board miserably, and obviously did not get promoted. And then, it's whatever. At the end of the day, it didn't make that big of an impact on my career, and it wasn't that big of a deal. But I kind of wanted to go back and challenge myself to that same uh, presentation challenge, because it's something that has stood in my way, and I'm trying to beat down those roadblocks that have been there for a long time and have, kind of stained my record, if you will. And so going into this, I haven't thought about hazing really at all. I mean, it crossed my mind momentarily, but I didn't really develop or form any thoughts on it. So I'm going to try and do that on the spot here as I talk through the problem of hazing. This may be a burner episode because this may turn out absolutely terrible. But you know what? We'll go along for the journey and we'll see what happens. All right, so hazing. Obviously, it's a bad thing. We all know it's a bad thing. Why is it a bad thing, though? A couple of reasons come to mind. I think the first reason that I can think of is it just doesn't develop. I mean, it counter-develops any sort of relationship between superiors and juniors within an organization. You're just not going to want to perform for the person who is actively tearing you down, whether it be physically or mentally, verbally, whatever the case may be. You're not going to want to work for that person. You know what I mean? You're not going to perform. It's going to reduce the performance of your subordinates. It's going to make them not want to work for you. It's going to make them not want to be around you. It's going to make people want to, generally avoid the person who's hazing them. So in that way, it deteriorates the relationship. It also could hurt in other ways, and that first one was so easy, and I feel like it's going to be harder to come up with other supporting rationale for this, especially on the spot. Hazing has long-term impacts on people who are being hazed. All right, I think a lot of Marines, a lot of military members across all branches have walked away from their military service with post-traumatic stress disorder that didn't even come from combat. All right, the stressors that occur. And I'm not trying to take away from combat at all. Please do not read into it in that way. People who come through combat have seen things that none of us can ever relate to, and it has hurt them in ways that we can never understand. But for people who have been hazed, I think there is still some post-traumatic stress disorder, and that not can't necessarily be healed. That's something that they're going to have to live with. They're going to have to deal with. They're going to have to work through and learn to cope with in their lives and for the rest of their lives. And how fair is that, right? It's not fair. It's not right. It's not ethical in any way. And whether it be verbal or physical or mental abuse, it doesn't matter. That has, all three of them have impacts on the person who's receiving that abuse. And so that's another reason why hazing is unacceptable. I'd like to get 3 reasons in here, and I'm fishing for another one, and I'm sure it's out there. Hazing is bad because it impacts the working relationship between superiors and subordinates. It has long-term impacts on the mental and physical health potentially of the person being hazed. And this is a bit of a stretch, but I think it can have mental impacts on the person doing the hazing, which maybe should have fallen under the other point, but I'm at a loss for the third point, so I'm going to use this. I don't think behaving unethically is good for the person who's hazing people either. All right, it forms really poor habits that are going to be hard to break going forward in one's life. And so if you haze people at one point in your life or in one aspect of your life, may that be work, I would argue you're going to find it difficult to be a good person in other aspects of your life, whether that be, in fatherhood or family life or community. Probably covers, maybe a church, if you go to church, something like that, right? So I feel like hazing and allowing yourself to haze people could generate and develop, poor habits that'll follow you throughout life and cause a lot of friction with the people that you surround you, and reduce the quality of your relationships and overall just have a negative impact on your life. And I think that's something that does actually need to be factored in. So hazing, obviously bad for the person being hazed. It's bad for the person doing the hazing, and it's also bad for the organization in which the hazing is occurring. Because like I said, it breaks down the trust, it breaks down that relationship that should exist between a leader and a subordinate. So all around bad. I feel like this wasn't the best little talk about hazing, but it did challenge me to think on the spot. I do feel like I made an ever so slight comeback from those days when I just stood up there and blanked out in front of a bunch of gunnery sergeants and higher ranked individuals, and so that's nice. And we made it to almost 10 minutes, which is a little long for this chat, but we'll take it. All right, I'm going to sign off. Y'all take it easy. Peace out.